-71 degrees Fahrenheit. The kind of cold that doesn't just chill you, it erases you. Every breath becomes a battle. Every heartbeat costs something. And somewhere out there, deep in the frozen wilderness of northern Canada, a woman lay bleeding in the snow, alone, abandoned, a shrapnel wound in her side, and no radio. Her name was Sergeant Elena Marsh, and she was not supposed to survive the night. But this story is not about dying. This is a story about what happens when the human spirit refuses to let go, even when everything else already has. Drop your city and state in the comments. Let's see how far this story reaches. And if you respect the brave men and women who serve, make sure you're following for more powerful military stories. Elena Marsh joined the Canadian Army at 19 years old. The daughter of a logger and a school teacher from rural Manitoba, she grew up understanding silence. She understood snow. She understood how to read wind patterns and trust her gut when the world went quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. By 31, she was one of the most decorated long-range marksmen in her regiment. A sniper. Patient, precise, and fiercely loyal to her unit. Her teammates called her Ghost because she could disappear into a landscape like she was born from it. And in the frozen training grounds of the Yukon, that nickname carried a weight that nobody thought would ever become dangerously literal. It was a joint training exercise. Canadian Special Forces working alongside a small team of U.S. Navy SEALs, practicing cold weather survival and extraction protocols in one of the most remote regions on the continent. Elena had done this before. She loved these exercises. The isolation, the focus, the way the cold stripped everything down to what actually mattered. Out there, in that howling white emptiness, you couldn't pretend. You either functioned or you didn't. Nobody expected the accident. It happened fast. A training simulation that turned chaotic when one of the snowmobiles skidded on an unseen ice shelf and sent 2 soldiers and their equipment tumbling into a ravine. In a scramble to help, in the noise and the radio chatter, and the sudden reorganization of priorities, Elena ended up separated from the group. A mistake that lasted 90 seconds. But 90 seconds was enough. Piece of shrapnel from the overturned equipment struck her below her right ribs. It didn't look serious at first. She pressed her glove against it, told herself it was fine, told herself she could walk it off. Then the team evacuated the injured soldiers. The radio went to static. The blizzard rolled in faster than any forecast had predicted. And by the time anyone realized Sergeant Marsh wasn't where he's supposed to be, 4 hours had passed. 4 hours in -71 degrees. She had lost blood. She had lost feeling in her hands. She had dug herself into a snowbank the way she had been trained to do in exactly this kind of situation, using her own body heat and layers of packed snow as insulation. She had done everything right, but doing everything right does not guarantee you survive. Elena told herself stories in that SNOWBNK. She later described it in an interview as the strangest thing she had ever done. Not praying? Exactly. Not bargaining with the universe. Just talking to herself about the things that mattered. Her mother's kitchen. The smell of coffee. Her little brother's laugh. A dog she had growing up named Biscuit, who used to sleep across her feet every winter night. She said that keeping herself in those memories, anchoring herself to the texture and warmth of ordinary life, was what stopped her from surrendering to the cold. Because the cold is seductive. People who have experienced severe hypothermia describe it as peaceful. A warmth that creeps in and tells you to stop fighting. Elena knew that lie. She had been trained to recognize it. So she kept telling stories. She kept her mind warm, even as her body dropped toward a temperature that had no business keeping a human heart beating. And then she heard the helicopter. SEAL medical team found her exactly 8 hours and 40 minutes after she had become separated from the group. What? They found stopped them cold. Not from the temperature. From sheer disbelief. Her core temperature registered at 26.7 degrees Celsius. That is well below the threshold that medical professionals define as severe hypothermia. That is, by every clinical measure, the kind of number that appears on a report. Not a pulse monitor. Petty Officer Second Class Daniel Rourke, the lead SEAL medic on the extraction team, later told reporters that in his 12 years of training in field medicine, he had never seen anyone alive at that core temperature in those conditions. He said he did not believe the reading the first time the thermometer showed it. He checked it again. Same number. He started working. The entire team moved with the kind of quiet urgency that comes from real training meeting a real moment. They used chemical heat packs, insulated wrapping, careful fluid management. They communicated in short, clipped sentences because there was no time for anything longer and no need for anything more. Elena, drifting in and out of consciousness, apparently looked up at one point and said, very clearly, "Took you long enough?" Rourke later said that was the moment he knew she was going to be okay. Elena Marsh spent 11 days in hospital. She had frostbite damage to 3 fingers and her left ear. She had the wound in her side treated and closed properly. She had a lot of soup and a lot of sleep and long phone calls with her mother. She returned to active service 8 months later. In the months following the incident, journalists asked her many times what she thought the secret was. What had kept her alive when the science said she shouldn't have been? Her answer was always the same, and it was never what people expected. She said, "I didn't survive because I was tough. I survived because I stayed present, because I refused to let my mind go somewhere that my body couldn't follow." She talked about how we all carry cold places inside us, not the Yukon kind, the kind that comes from grief, from fear, from the moments in life when we feel abandoned, or forgotten, or impossibly far from warmth. And she said the survival skill that matters most in those dark, cold places is the same one she used in that snowbank. Not brute force, not denial, just a deliberate, stubborn act of returning to what is real, what is warm, what is worth staying for. We all know what it feels like to be in the cold. Maybe it's a relationship that fell apart, a job that disappeared, a version of yourself that you lost somewhere and can't quite find your way back to, a grief that settled in so deep it started to feel like your normal temperature. Elena's story reminds us of something important. Survival is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is profoundly quiet. It is the choice to keep telling yourself the story of the things you love. It is the refusal to believe the seductive lie that going numb is the same as being at peace. The rescue team did eventually come. They always do, in one form or another. A friend who calls at the right moment. A morning that feels slightly less heavy than the one before. A memory so warm it cuts right through the cold. You just have to still be there when they arrive. If Elena's story meant something to you today, share it with someone who might need it. Leave a comment below and tell me what keeps you warm in the cold moments of your life. Subscribe to Soul Relief Stories because every week we bring you exactly this kind of story. The kind that reminds you what human beings are truly capable of. Take care of yourself and stay warm.